Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Amerant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. What a year, 2020. Most people would say, let's forget 2020 and let's hope that 2021 and 2022 will be better. Often I take my crystal apple and I ask my guests how things are going to be. So today I've assembled three wonderful individuals who have unique backgrounds and more than one aspect of business and real estate or financing to provide their insight on their outlook for 2021. My guests today include Laura Greenfield, the Executive Vice President for Commercial Real Estate for the New York and New Jersey region of People's United Bank. Ken Swig, who is the CEO of Swig Equities, who is also the president of Hemsley Spear and one of the co-founders of Brown Harris Stevens. And last but not least, my friend Joseph Pistelli, who is the chairman of Pistelli Real Estate Group and chairman of First Central Savings Bank. Thank you all for being here. So Laura, you're here as one banker, and we have an individual over there who's a big real estate guy, but he's also a banker. How do you see 2021?
Well, thanks for having me, Michael, and hope everyone is well. So clearly real estate environment right now is a challenging one. And we first look at just even, I know you had some investment sales professionals, I think on your show earlier today. Investment sales are clearly down well below normal averages. And if you think about it, investment sales are a big chunk of what we finance, acquisitions. So that in combination with what we think is going to be a tough winter with the pandemic, we think the first quarter and second quarter, really the first half of the year, is likely going to have low loan growth. But if you think about it, most of the population is supposed to have access to the vaccine come mid-year. So we believe that once people are vaccinated, there's this concept of people have at least 60 to 75% of people getting vaccinated, that you'll have the concept of herd immunity. And with that, that should really help us in the second half of the year. So first half, low loan growth. Second half, we're much more optimistic.
Looking at your press release recently, the prior quarter, you reduced your exposure in the multifamily business significantly. Are you open for business today in multifamily?
Absolutely. We actually have a loan that we, terms that we just approved, looking to close the beginning of the year in terms of a development project for rentals. So and this is in a more suburban market. So in regards to development projects, yes, absolutely. We are looking to finance rental projects. but if you think about it, we were pre-pandemic very bullish on this suburban market and what was already taking place. Now that's just gotten exacerbated. If you talk to many owners and operators outside of, I'd say more in the suburban market, right now, the rental market, the occupancy rates are very high and they're not providing concessions. But there is the difference between the haves and have-nots. You know, the counterparts of owners and operators in New York City have had challenging occupancy rates, and they've been having to offer very high concessions. It's funny when you say you see that we have runoff in our multifamily book. That's actually a specific book of business.
No, I understand, and I think it's a book of business that you inherited. There, at one time, People's United was very active in that, but it's a perfect leeway to Joe Pistelli over here, who happens to be the owner of what, 6,000 apartments in New York?
Yeah, approximately, yes.
So what's really happening in the residential rental apartments in your business? Because you're in, I believe, 4 out of the 5 boroughs, correct?
Yes.
So where do you see the market today? Is it a renter's opportunity and a landlord is crying? Where do we see the world?
I think the world has changed. I agree with Laura that from the banking business, I think that the second half of 2021 is going to be very different than we've been used to in the past. It is a renter's market, but I think more than that, what we really need to face up to, at least in New York City and parts of the boroughs, is that the renters are leaving New York City. That's a reality. Vacancy rates are very, very high. New regulations that have been instituted into the multifamily that we're used to, your B and C type properties, not so much new construction, but definitely your bread and butter, as we put that, as we use that term. Those renters have gone away. They're expecting very, very big reductions in rent. So I think that the components in the whole multifamily as we know it, pre-war and post-war, is that definitely changes are going to be made there. The acquisitions, the underwriting, the availability of that product, which has been both for the real estate people, they've invested in that product because that's what's out there, most of it. And banks have lent on that for a very long period of time. I see that being a very big change going forward, how it's viewed.
Ken, you have different fields of business. Swig Equities is in ownership. Brown Harris Stevens is in brokerage. Hemsley Spear is in office and investment sales. Okay, where are we in the different markets? Where are we really in the office market? What do you see happening?
Well, first of all, the occupancy rate, not the vacancy and not the lease rate, but the actual occupancy of what people are occupying their spaces in the buildings is probably about 12% right now. And I don't think it's getting higher right now. We're in the middle of a very hot spot of the United States in the pandemic. So we've got another 3 months or 4 months or so before we start regaining that occupancy when the vaccine is released and it starts to get into the general population. So we're working in an environment where very few people are really occupying the office space at the moment. So that's a bit of a problem. But there's light at the end of the tunnel, clearly, because we now have a vaccine. Secondly, what's interesting, which has not happened in the past, is that the sublet market right now in the commercial market in New York City represents approximately 26% of the marketplace. So there's a very, very high percentage of available space is encompassed in the sublet market. But on the other hand, I will tell you, if you look at the perspective of the banking world, looking at commercial office space, we did, which is public record. My family with Brookfield just did a CMBS on the Grace Building. We did a $1.3 billion CMBS comprised of Bank of America and JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and Credit Suisse. And that on at, at 2.6% for a 10-year deal. So they clearly look through and past the COVID environment right now and are pretty bullish on office space with kind of rate.
But that's a unique building, okay, with all credit tenants, okay? Let's get to the other buildings, the B buildings, okay? Not too far away from the Grace building are a number of B buildings that are hurting, okay? The buildings in the 30s and the 40s, the mid-block buildings, people are moving out. People are just saying, I'm going to work from home. I'm leaving the area. And I don't see people returning to them that soon, even with a vaccine.
I'm going to say this, that there are certain things that I think are permanently established as part of our new business environment. Working from home, I think, may be incorporated one day a week or so with our general office population. If you have an enormous amount of emails to do and now you can go home and just focus on getting your emails done and working from a home environment, yes. Otherwise, productivity, creativity, opportunity does not exist at home. And the actual work and accuracy of the work doesn't really work at home either. So I think that this is a temporary thing. Right now, people keep talking about who's moved out. There are approximately 300,000 registered with the post office, right? So 300,000 new change of addresses have occurred. That's probably about 450,000 people. Of that, 50% of that is typically students, restaurant, and hotel type of employment. Those will come back when we reopen. The other 50%, though, we'll have to see. But most of those people have moved within a 2-hour radius of New York City. So I don't think this is a permanent problem like we had in the 70s, where we lost 768,000 jobs and 1.1 million people moved out of the city. We're nowhere near anything like that. And these people are going to be coming back into the city. The young population is going to be coming back and can't wait to come back right now. So I think we're looking at a 6-7 month issue. And I think we get past that. And I do believe we're going to have a big spike of energy that comes back into New York City.
Joe, you've lost tenants in some of your properties. Many of these people may have moved back to their parents or so on. What extent have you really seen of people moving out over the past 9 months?
I would say probably maybe 10%, 12% have moved out. And I think the important part of that move out is the replacement. I go back to saying the replacing of those tenants. It is not easy. As Mr. Swig said, as Kent said, that the buildings, office buildings are 12.5%, 15% occupied. That is a devastating factor. New York City is a vertically built city. I'm not sure that I agree with everything that we're hearing and listening to and reporting on this afternoon. I use Brown Harris Stevens for our office buildings, and we have a decent size of that. We don't have extremely high vacancies in those buildings, but we're about 60 to 75% occupied. Renting the space, what we seem to be getting are people who do come in from Brown Harris Stevens and other co-brokers, basically using our rent, using our space as a counter offer to the space they're already in to renegotiate leases that they're in. That's what I believe is happening. Going back to the B and C type buildings, yes, they're definitely moving out. They're definitely moving out of New York. New York is a great city. It is the most wealthiest city from a professional point of view and from a residential point of view. It is the heartbeat of the world, but we cannot underestimate, and we should not underestimate, regardless of the professions that we represent. New York City is no longer real estate politically friendly. And you got to get up and you got to recognize that. They are going to be concreted into the fundamental reason of buying and owning real estate in New York. You buy something at a certain price, you improve it, you want to make it better.
Over the years, WeWork has been one of the co-working spaces, and many of you have worked with them or have them in your buildings, okay? Where do you see the co-working and the co-living in 2021 and 2022?
if that question is for me, Mike, then I just want to touch about that. On the banking side, we had done a lot of projects. We've constructed, we financed a lot of construction projects that had the multiple co-working space concept connected to it. It's been done in Long Island City. A lot of it's been done in Brooklyn. You may or may not know this. As of the last few months, the building department is no longer issuing C of Os on those projects. So those developers have to convert them back to being more of a typical apartment house dwelling. There's no shared kitchen, there's no shared bathrooms, and that's all from the pandemic. The social distancing, you can't have 3, 4, 5 people living in a 5-room apartment, sharing a living room, a bathroom, and so on and so forth. So that entire piece has changed going forward with buildings that were built or remodeled or altered to fit that specific purpose. That's changed. So I don't see that existing going forward.
Okay, I'd like to address that question to Laura as the banker looking at co-living and co-working, and Kent as the owner and also, involved with area. Laura?
Well, this is interesting. Pre-pandemic, there was one of our clients, a developer, decided, this was only 6 months ago, or I guess prior to pandemic, so about a year ago, had decided to convert a few additional units to co-working space in their new rental apartment building. And they said that was really having to do with the phenomenon, right, of living from home and people in their 600 square foot apartment not wanting to necessarily work from home all day in the same environment. So here's an ability for them to still work from home, but in a different place in the building. And I know this is only one component of co-working, but I do think post-pandemic, when we're allowed to be within 6 feet from each other, I think developers are going to be focused, or even existing owners, on converting more space, shared space within buildings, to co-working, because that work from home phenomenon isn't going away. There was, someone had just come out recently that they believe post-pandemic, a consultant, that 20% more of your week will be spent working from home than in the office. So I think co-working under rental buildings, under maybe it's condos, that space, that will continue to expand.
I'll agree and disagree a little. I think that the co-working is a piece of business and a type of business in the market segment that it's here to stay. And when we look back on 2020 with 2020 vision, we'll see a perspective that co-working and working from home are part of our society, and they're going to remain. However, I still say that if you look at the statistics of productivity and efficiency, the first 3 months of the pandemic, they were quite high, and they have reduced all the way, since the next 6 months. It doesn't particularly work well. In addition to which, the opportunity and creativity is really dramatically reduced, because when you're working from home, you just don't have the intercontact and interconnections and networking with other people that we've come to grow and know and prosper with. And a good example of that is, if we look at Facebook, they have 1.5 million square feet in the Hudson Yards, right? They have not yet occupied the space because it's under construction. And in the middle of the pandemic in July, they leased another 730,000 square feet at the Farley office building. And I think that tells you that here's a company that told people that they're not really going to have to work again back into the office until June of 2021. And they said that way early, and their timing actually is pretty close. But they have doubled down on the amount of office space they've had. Amazon has done that because it's the density of New York City, which is our drawback right now, is also our greatest asset. And I think that human interaction is something that's irreplaceable. So yes, I think office space will be coming. Working from home will be a little piece of the pie, but I don't think it's going to be as deeply entrenched as we think it is.
The retail and yes, Laura.
I was gonna say, but it's interesting from a lending perspective. That's why office right now there's a lot of uncertainty. And no, we're not necessarily all on the same page, and that's lenders need certainty.
Yep.
Well, I was going to address a question. I've known a number of landlords who have changed their rental charges on retail. They've given people percentage rents, some landlords completely. How do you see that? And Joe, as a landlord, how are you doing it? Because they just can't afford to, the volume isn't there. As you said, it's a 12%, Kent says 12% occupancy in the city. Midtown Manhattan, there's nothing. Many of the leading restaurants have changed. When the temperature is 30 degrees, it's a little cold to eat outside. So
Yeah.
where do you see landlords and banks looking at that when they can't make the payment to you?
So, Michael, I'll touch upon that for a moment on my own experience. So, our retail business has not been so damaged as it has been in Manhattan. Space in Manhattan stores, our retail stores, we've basically reduced our rent in some cases to 25% to reflect their occupancy. And that was a choice of either letting them go or then trying to keep them still in business. Most of our tenants have been with us for 15 years, 10 years, 20 years. Where we've seen that we only had to give a certain amount of short-term assistance, and now basically our retail tenants are back on track paying their regular rent. That may change if the governor, again, or the mayor decide to do a 10% or 20% like they're talking about now in the restaurant business. In our ethnic bound communities. So our real estate that we have in the Bronx that basically has a ethnic group renting from us, and their patronage is from the same community. We've seen that they've survived and held up much better than Manhattan has. Manhattan can't get back to business on retail because the occupancy, and I go back to the occupancy versus the vacancy, people aren't going to work. They're not going to work. They're working from home. And I agree with Kent on a few things. And I'll go back to the co-working or the working from home concept. And I do believe it's here to stay. How much of it, I don't know. But I also see it as an opportunity for other states, which I understand are reaching out to people in New York City to move to their state, continue to work from home in their state, and receive a moving bonus to go there of $10,000 and $15,000 to go and work in a different state and become a resident of a different state, but still come to work from home in New York City. So I think if that starts to really catch on, and it will catch on, it's going to be harder to continue to rent this space. Companies are not demanding their workers to come back to work, and rightfully so. They can't. So as long as those people do not come back to work, the working from home will deteriorate the corporate infrastructure of strategic planning, the corporate structure of legacy, and of setting up who's going to run these companies in the future, because you can't train people from home. And that Kent is 100% on point with that. I agree with that.
With a couple of minutes left, I want to address the question to Laura. It's very hard, okay, to get new business when you're not seeing that patient face to face. It's not an easy time for banks to get new clients, because you don't want to be totally dependent on intermediaries. You want to meet them directly. So that's hitting the market also.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Our organization, and I think many organizations, are investing a lot in technology right now, right? So that we can still, it's not the same, but we can still meet, interact, at least by seeing each other through a video like Zoom. So we've been spending a lot of money and time. I'm actually pretty proud of myself of how much now I've learned to use technology, which is good because I think that's the future. not the future in sales, right? As a salesperson in lending, of course, we're going to have to see our people in the future and our clients and want to be near our clients. But to tie that in actually with the working from home phenomenon, I know from my team, right? My biggest assets are my people. And I want my people to be happy and thriving. And if that means they have to come up with a creative schedule where it's certain days in the office, meeting clients, all those days, and they want a day or two to work from home and work on other aspects of the job through that way, I'm actually very much supportive of it. I think there's a happy medium to make everyone satisfied. But I think the one thing, this just sped up and is speeding up the shift in corporations figuring out the use of technology.
Right.
And not every job is going to be require you to meet people in person. So many organizations, if people want to work from home and they have a more back office operational job, I think we're going to be open to it. Everyone will be, I think, more open to it.
So I hope that my crystal apple gets much brighter, and I hope to see you later on in 2021 when we can be much more optimistic and the world is in a much better place because of the vaccine and things are working out. I'd like to thank Laura, Kent, and Joe, and I'll see you next week.
Thank
Pleasure.
you, Mike.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.